All right, Martin, ramble on.
Well, so it's been quite a while since we last talked, and I went on retreat. Um,
Yes.
and I came back, and it's been about 2, 3 weeks since I've been back. Um, so yeah, that's that's the um, that's the clear part of it. What would you like me to talk about?
Well, I'd like first off to mention how marvelous that retreat was that you didn't have to call me for 2.5 weeks afterward.
Um, yeah, I don't know that that's the case. Um, Yeah, it's been a bumpy 2 weeks since I've come back. There was quite a bit of um, yeah, negative stuff. Nothing super terrible, but um, yeah, it's always hard for me to find a time to call you because of the time zone difference, um, which means that I have to get up super early, um, which like while working is pretty tough. So. Um, That's
Is
that's
it
more that's more the reason for that.
is it right now super early?
Yeah, I got up, or I tried to get up at 5. Even like it's my day off, but I don't know. Yeah, uh, it's logistically difficult sometimes.
Okay. Um, I apologize on behalf of the planet Earth
Yeah,
for spinning around and not having two suns, but even that would not change the time zone
yeah,
actual differences.
yeah. Nothing that can be done about that, I think.
Uh,
So yeah,
yeah, actually, we can enjoy it quite marvelous the way it is.
yeah, yeah,
In that regard, isn't it marvelous that you found out a nice reason to wake up at 5 in the morning?
yeah. This is. I was actually looking forward to this, and it made me want to get up.
Precisely so.
Yeah. So the retreat was very eventful and a lot of different things happened. And the aftermath of it was also eventful and interesting, but I kind of don't know where to start in order to put this in some sort of coherent thing that people will be able to understand or you will be able
Okay,
to understand.
when and where, who did the retreat? What style was it in? That's the way to get going.
Okay, so um, this was a 16-day Vipassana retreat um, in the tradition of Ajahn Tong, who teaches, I would call it a variation on the Mahasi system, where it's basically, so it's Vipassana, definitely, and it uses the noting labeling technique as well as the Mahasi people do, but then it's got some variations. Um, Most notably, I would say, is that they do a lot of walking meditation. So it's the same amount of walking as it is sitting. So walk an hour, sit an hour, that kind of stuff. Um, and also, it's like you don't just note the rise and fall of the abdomen. You kind of, there's a number of different touch points throughout the body where you kind of, it's almost like a body scanning technique a bit where um, you kind of
Sort
move.
of a shorthand body scan.
Yeah, it's kind of, so you note rising, falling, sitting, touching. And then the touching is one of 28 different touch points all throughout the body. Um, where, as far as I understand it, with the Mahasi system, they just stick with the rising and falling for the most part. Um, but yeah, it was a Vipassana retreat. Um, this was in th- this was in Germany, since I live in Germany, and it's it's a retreat center or like a meditation center where they have a resident teacher who studied with John Tong, I think back in the 90s or something, for quite a long while. And she basically lives there, and they have the center open year round for people to do retreat there.
Okay.
Yeah, that's about the
How much do they charge for these retreats?
nothing.
Okay. That's the first check mark. That's really
Yeah,
an important check mark to put down.
it's all based on dana. So there's no fees. There's not even like a cancellation fee. It's entirely, you can just show up and they will take care of you. It's a beautiful house as well. It's like a huge old country house with a huge garden, and it's basically the Garden of Eden there. Like, I've never seen so many bees and birds. It's very beautiful.
Animals tend to thrive in places where they're not molested.
Yeah, it's yeah. So anyway,
So
if
they're
no,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
No, please.
So if people want to check this out, um, for the YouTube people, it's called Dhammachari Vipassana. So Dhamma as in Dhamma, and then Chari, Cari, and it's near Munich in Germany. If anyone will be up for it after I finish my tale.
Okay. That's a version of the Dhamma Chakra, as in the Dhamma Chakravaranta Sutta, which means turning of the wheel of the
Yep.
Dhamma.
Yep. Their logo or their symbol is it has the 8-spoke wheel, with like a burning candle for wisdom, I guess, or for insight, and then 2 hands like this holding.
And what are the 8 spokes?
It's the Eightfold Noble Path, right?
Yes, exactly. Which means that some of those Dhamma wheels are being shown with 12 spokes.
Oh, okay.
And
Never
what
seen
would
that.
that possibly represent?
Well, that has to be dependent origination, the 12 links.
Precisely so.
Yeah. So one thing that might be interesting to know about this retreat that I think makes it fairly unique is that it's not the case that they have a lot of people start at the same time. So usually the way or the way I think most retreats are run is that a bunch of people show up all on the same day, and then they run a retreat for a given time, and then it ends, and then the next one starts. But the way they do it there is basically people can show up each day, and everyone's on their own schedule. So it's kind of a rolling system where what they have you do is there's a set schedule for the day in terms of waking up, breakfast, lunch, no dinner, and then sleep. And what they have you do is you do your meditation with a timer. So you have like a small like digital timer, and in the beginning you start out with 10 minutes walking, 10 minutes sitting, and then you take a break of like about 20 minutes or so, and then you start again. And then what they have you do is each day they increase your time by 5 minutes. So the second day you do 15-15 and then take a break. And in that way they increase it by 5 minutes every day until you get to 60-60, which is kind of the end point. So you do just over 2 hours of meditation and then take a about 20-minute break. So the breaks stay the same. In that way, it gets more intense over time. And then basically every day or every other day, new people show up, people leave. So that was fairly interesting because I've never heard of that or seen that before.
It while it sounds a bit contrived, it certainly works because it fits right in with a very natural approach. They're just actually occasionally kicking the nature 5 minutes at a time. But the natural way to do it is exactly like that.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, because if you have seclusion, then you do it until the mind gets tired. Now, there's two ways that the mind gets tired. One of the ways that it gets tired is because the student is not breathing enough. This is what happens mostly at schools or in offices or on buses or in places where people are sitting down. They tend to not breathe very much and they breathe shallowly and they're not breathing deeply. This is also true of meditations that are not anapanasati based, with that deep breath that needs to be taken every time we remember, because we want to bring that part of the mind up alive. Okay, so once we're doing the breathing correctly, which is a key part, that's why the Buddha put it as step number one. He also defined the terms and or the verbs in the sense of understanding the difference between the long breath and the short breath. To work with those two things to make sure that you're getting enough air, so that you constantly keep going back to the breath and checking how things are. That's the importance of it. So that's one of the reasons why people get dull. There's another reason why people get dull. Even if they're getting the mind oxygenated correctly, it's still a workout. If they're practicing correctly, this is a workout. We're actually exercising the mind in a way that is similar to going to a gym and exercising the body.
Yeah.
And you can recognize that one of the things that they teach in the gym is how to breathe, because they want to make sure you're getting enough air, because you can't do anything if you can't breathe. The same thing with this, only now we're exercising the brain. And you probably have heard that the human brain is the source, or let us say, is the location where most of the oxygen that's taken out of the lungs and put into the bloodstream and pumped from the heart right into the brain, that's where most of that oxygen is burned up, eaten up right there. Because especially that reptilian brain has got to have his share, because his job is survival. Above all else, we have to keep that part of the mind going. And yet, the human frontal part of the brain is that part of the brain that actually is like the supercomputer that uses almost all of the oxygen whenever it's available. And so if the oxygen is not as available, then the supercomputer will shut down the human part of the brain, leaving only the anterior cortex, the laptop, to run the show. Because you don't want him to do without his grub. Every heartbeat, all right?
Yeah. At that point, you go unconscious, and then it's game over pretty soon.
And then you're dead if you stop breathing, or if the heart stops. So that part of the brain is the last part of the brain that dies. In fact, if the person is underwater, drowning, then, and they know this because they've done so much research on Navy SEALs and whatnot, that the legs will start to die first. And when I say die, I mean are cut off from oxygen. They're starved. There's only enough oxygen allowed into the legs to keep them actually alive, but they're totally functionally not useful. And when legs get into that condition, it's hard to swim. And And also with the arms, the same thing is there also true. And so the body shuts down more and more and more, so that just the last thing that's left is the heart and that reptilian brain. And those are the last to go when there's an oxygen starvation. This is just neuroscience. They just kind of know these things. I don't know how many people had to die over that or how far they took it.
Yeah, probably a
But
bunch of
this is
rats.
right. That's the name, Dhammarato. So that this is what we're actually looking at is that this is why the old way of a doctor telling someone was alive or dead was because they used to put a mirror up the side of the nose to see if there was any change of air. But now they know, oh no, it's not whether the person has stopped breathing. They may, in fact, live a long time after that as the body starts to shut down. Isn't that amazing? So the question is, how far can it shut down before the thing can get revived? Even if the heart shuts down, if the next thing that shuts down is the heart, that reptilian brain will still be alive. And that'll be about the last thing to go when there's no oxygen at all left. But oftentimes, by then, not modern medical science is on the show. They get that heart pumping, they can start those lungs breathing again, and they can get a revival out of it. And it happens often. In fact, one of the world's records was like 21 hours. A guy pulled his son out of the water, and he would not stop. The EMS people kept doing it and doing it and doing it, and they would want to stop and say, man, we've lost your kid. And he says, no, you got to keep doing it. You got to keep doing the CPR. You keep having to pound that chest, and you keep having to give the air. You have to breathe the air for the kid and then pound his chest, and then breathe the air for the kid and pound his chest. You get that thing going. 21 hours, and this kid finally started coughing up seawater. That reflex of throwing that water out of the lungs, he had just recovered that part of the reptilian brain. Now, the rest of the story about what condition this kid was in, we don't know. I don't know what the story was, but I do know that that's about the bottom line at that level. Now, why I'm telling you this, I'm not sure, but it is a kind of Dhamma lesson.
Yeah.
And the Dhamma lesson really is that every time you can remember to start again, as Goenka says, start with that deep, long in-breath. Take a deep breath. Get as much oxygen back into the body, because normally when we're sitting in meditation and are not watching the breath, then that happens. Now, that is not likely to happen when we're doing walking meditation. The walking meditation has one of the benefits is that we keep ourselves more oxygenated. And also, here's a question. Were the walking meditations done with a boundary in the sense that there was actually a known limit and that you were going to walk from this place to that place, back and forth, or was it an open walking meditation where you just kind of wandered around? Which was it?
So the way they do walking meditation is you have a path of about 3 to 5 meters, which I guess is like 10, 15 feet. And then you walk that from end to end, and you turn around at each end. And the way they do the walking is, it's not normal pace walking. It's very, very slow. So they teach it in different steps where you break down each step into smaller and smaller increments, let's say. So in the beginning, you just...
I know. I've heard all about it. I know.
So,
but anyway, sorry to interrupt you. I guess you should go ahead and tell the story.
Yeah, just very briefly, like in the beginning, you do like left foot, right foot, type noting and just note each foot. And the way you actually do it is each step is just 1 foot's length. So the heel of your right foot gets placed right where the toes of the left foot are, and vice versa.
Ooh, that kind of requires balance. That's a new skill to learn.
Yeah, and actually if you lose mindfulness, you start to wobble.
Oh, don't you know?
Yeah, and then and then they break it down further until in the end, I think you have 6 different parts for each step that get noted. So it might actually, you might only make it, let's say, 50 feet during an hour of walking meditation. So, but it's still more active than sitting.
Moving, touching, landing. Yes, there's various of those that are actually quite remarkably easy to mark by watching. But some places go too far. They say, wow, if 4 or 5 points is great, 12 must be wonderful. And so then they break it down far more detail than is actually needed. But that's the way that church ladies operate. It's called too much of a good thing is wonderful.
Yeah.
But if you can keep track of what the foot is actually doing in a smooth motion, then that's more of the process that it's going through. That again, these actual individual points that they're pointing out is again these organized ways. And that you can see that the organized way got organized because someone was trying to describe the motion in its various movements. And so they wind up getting stuck on these clocks that only tick very slowly instead of letting it be a smooth guide. But in fact, I know that method well. And I know the distinctions between that and how that's practiced at Wat Suan Mok. For one thing, at Wat Suan Mok, it's not a boundaried position necessarily. There's sometimes you practice with a boundary and sometimes not. It's also not necessary to slow down, but what it is necessary to do is to make clear note when you've reached the end of that boundary and you turn around. That should be, again, a big nibbana moment. All right, that in fact is quite possible for people in walking meditation to at least to arrive at the second jhana, to where you're literally just bouncing with energy.
Yeah.
And that the mind is quiet because it's actually really paying attention to what's going on.
Well,
but that happens most all over the body. But it can be done better by, instead of thinking, oh, I know exactly what they mean with the rise of the foot. Oh, I know exactly what they mean by pushing the foot forward. Oh, I know exactly what they mean by touching. And then I know exactly what they mean by landing. But that's not the right way to do it. That's the intellectual. The right way to do this is to watch it in a smooth motion. Don't do a jerk with each one of them, because that's not a natural motion. You just do it in a smooth way, noting what's happening all along. And the closer you watch, the more you can see of what the actual foot is doing. And so that's the difference between the Wat Suan Mok style and the style that comes from the Mahasi system. But they both have benefit. But one has a little bit more wisdom about what really is going on. Now, here's one of the points about it is that because the mind gets more oxygen just because you're out there moving, and so the natural part of the mind is going to make you breathe. But if you take even more air, then you can get even more settled. So like I said, you can achieve second jhana while you're in these walking places. And that the boundaries are very helpful for that. But it's also good to just start out walking, in the sense that wherever you go. Do it as a walking meditation. Watch what you're doing. Look at your footfalls.
Yeah.
The metaphor is that, hey, that's a dangerous world out there. There's cow pies and splinters and hard rocks, and we're out there barefoot. So we got to really watch where we're going step by step. That's one of the teachings about going barefoot. That's a natural practice for monks. That in fact I don't wear shoes hardly. Gosh, I know that I will wear shoes most of the day on one day a year, and that's when I go to renew the visa. And that every time that there's a trip to town, which sometimes lasts less than 30 minutes round trip, the shoes are there. I even will take a shirt, so in case I have to go into a building, I'll put the shirt on. But other than that, it's barefoot all the way. And so it sometimes go months without ever putting shoes on. Which means when I leave the porch, I got to watch where I'm putting every foot. Every footfall, you have to watch where you're going. Now, one of the qualities of walking meditation is the quality of, because we're mindfully watching and slowing down, our footfalls have much, much less impact upon the earth, that we begin to walk lightly on the earth. In the American Indian system, they talked about it as walking on bended knee. And the rationale is that if you are actually walking consciously like that and stooped just a little bit, that you're much more likely, like a lion, to get your prey as you're sneaking up on that buffalo. And so it was actually mindfulness of walking that they had in order to get lunch. Quite often out there barefoot, by the way, also.
Yeah.
So, in that regard, this walking meditation is actually quite a natural thing and is actually quite beneficial. So the point that I'm making is, now that you've picked up this practice and that you've been doing it longer and longer so that you can do it at an hour of the stretch without the mind getting too tired of watching this, now make for you, and this is special instructions, I don't give this out often, you have to now become mindful like that with every step. If you get out of a chair, you get out of it and you stand up. You don't start walking. A lot of people get out of a chair walking. So you're going to get out of a chair and you're going to stand and you're going to note the intention of why you're walking. And so now you're going to watch every step as if every place you go is kind of an obstacle. Because in fact it is. That's why the reptilian mind has been guiding you as you walk while the mind's just going all over the place. Now we're going to start walking mindfully. But what will happen is that you will walk up to people and they don't even know you're there.
Yeah.
And somehow they'll see a shadow, they'll turn around and they'll be so surprised. It is actually quite a work of a training that, through walking meditation, that brings one to, when you're walking up to someone, you're not intending to do anything with them. They're not in your thoughts. You are not sending signals about me and you and me and you. You're watching the body as it moves. And you can, by watching the body as it moves, not engage with people in psycho whatever babble mentality, so that you can actually be right behind somebody, so that as they turn around, they bump right into you and it scares the Jesus out of them.
Yeah.
And that's really, really fun because you're just standing there. But that takes mindfulness of walking. So that's one of the values of it. In fact, this is part of the reason and rationale of people getting the idea that monks can fly. It's because, where the heck did you come from? Well, I just walked up here. I just walked mindfully. I just watched where I was going. And here I am. And you just didn't pick up on it until after I had arrived.
Yeah. I've actually started doing more of an informal walking meditation ever since the last week or so. I'm actually walking to work right now, which is about 35 minutes twice a day. And I'm doing that as a walking meditation.
Are you doing it on grassy areas or dirt, or are you doing it on pavement?
No, it's in the city. So I have to wear shoes, but
You just told me why, too.
I mean, I could technically, like, it's not the case that there's like tons of shards of broken glass, but it's still the case that I work at an office and I just can't show up with like sooty black feet to the office or without shoes to the office. That just doesn't fly. So,
No, but you could wind up with a backpack, an empty backpack showing up normally at work, or actually a backpack that had one sooty towel in it.
yeah.
Where you sit down someplace a few minutes or whatever before work and you put the shoes on mindfully and then feel what it's like to have feet inside of shoes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so
I
that's
might actually
but
experiment with
it's
that.
the pavement is the problem. And that's a problem because you haven't got built up to it yet. So what you want to do is practice as often as you can barefoot. That in fact, that's the question. Did anybody at that retreat do it barefoot? But they did. But a lot of people did.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think about that, huh?
Yeah, I mean, makes sense. At that point, you're you're not doing a whole lot of steps, and you're walking in such a slow and light and delicate way that it's not really putting that same stress on your feet that would be put on it by walking barefoot over concrete for hours.
The answer to that is duh. If you are actually walking mindfully, you do in fact walk lightly. And therefore, the damage that you do to the pavement and the damage you do to your foot with a football is much less. You're much less likely to leave a trail of skin. That in fact, a bloodhound would have a whole lot of trouble more following a barefoot monk than a regular person because of the shoes themselves have quite a lot of smell, and many times it's the shoes that the dog is tracking anyway. But this is the point that we're making is start to live on the earth lightly. And the way to do that is to start practicing more and more often, being barefoot, feeling what it is to feel. In other words, if there's a point in time that you have to walk on gravel, then you walk on that gravel and you do it with the mentality of we're going to take the feet off of the gravel, but we're going to walk on it. And we're going to allow the experience without having to change it in the sense of ouch, 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 like that, because gravel, in fact, to a person who is not used to walking barefoot, it's painful. And then, in fact, this is quite a point of mention. I was over at a dojo here on the island with my friend Greg, who had a teacher who was teaching there that he knew in Singapore, teaching Muay Thai. Now, Muay Thai is a really, really tough man's sport in Thailand. They use boxing gloves for some strange reason, But in Thailand, they don't punch with boxing gloves like boxers do in the West. They use those boxing gloves to grab and hold their boxing mate so that they can hit him in the jaw with the elbow. It's a lot of the stuff done that way, and it's a lot done barefoot. And so the Muay Thai has a quality of really getting the body tough so that we can go about like that. And so that was one of the qualities, you see, that most in the West, because we've gotten so used to wearing shoes, even in the house, that we're very rarely walking around barefoot. And so therefore, because the shoes protect us, we don't have to be so mindful of watching where we're going.
Yeah.
And so that's the skill of the warriors, is also to do it barefoot. Because then with the feet, you can use them as real weapons if you know how to use them.
Yeah.
To where with a foot or in a shoe, it's really, really hard to do anything much. And shoes are really hard, really easy to grab hold of and turn somebody over with it. To where a slippery foot is quite alive and alert and knows what's going on due to practice, can slip right out of his opponents trying to grab hold of his foot. And so they don't practice that way. It's all done barefoot. And this is really an important part of walking meditation. So the way that you would want to do it is to refrain, at least in the house, from wearing shoes. Go barefoot in the house at least. You just spend a fair amount of time at home.
Yeah.
You know, in Asia, they normally park the shoes outside the house. The people in Thailand, they don't wear shoes in the house. They outside. In Germany, they say, "Oh, it's too cold."
Yeah.
The answer to that is, well, wear socks if you have to, and let the socks do that part of the job. But you don't need shoes. Wear socks if it's cold. And if it's even colder than that, then put on 2 pair of socks, but you don't have to put on shoes. And so you can walk around barefoot and give your feet complete freedom to open up, to move them around. This is a very, very good exercise. So now that you mentioned it, I thought that I would dredge all of this stuff up because it's a really, really excellent practice. Even if they do it with the Mahasi style, you still get that understanding of what's going on because you're really paying attention, you're really alert, and in the regard of the way, the placing the feet in that stylized way and maintain your balance is a really, really beneficial exercise. That I highly agree. That's a really good thing. And it has 2 major benefits. One is that it helps the balance and keep you balanced by watching your balance and noticing what you're doing. It's a real mindfulness tool right from the very beginning. But the other quality of it is that it requires you also to watch where you're going, to notice it and note it, see it clearly as it's going through this process. And so this is a very, very good skill that if you practice like that in walking meditation with the boundary set, then by taking both the boundaries of the set distance and also the boundaries of now you're going to be out in the world and you're going to have to walk naturally. How now do we watch every footfall so as to not step on a snake, to not step on a rock, to not step on a cow path? But to watch mindful is we're stepping down the road and we are so doing it very lightly indeed. I even have to tell you one story about that, and that is that at one point I was capable of being Achan Po, and all of the monks were sitting there eating their food and doing all of that kind of stuff, and it's possible to come to the back, and so I was able to walk right up to Achan Po and stand there for quite a long time without him noticing that I was there. And that gave me great joy because that guy, he's alert, he's sharp. And so I had to be special quiet and special, not moving, doing a real standing meditation, a walking meditation that got me there, and a standing meditation that allowed me to be within inches of him. And he did not know that I was there. That was great joy. That was great joy. I don't tell that story very often because it only happened once and there's no reason to try to prove it. But it does allow you to know that there is a skill that's really worth developing.
Yeah. To me, it's really interesting to do like this hybrid thing of just getting to work and doing formal meditation while walking. So it's not as strict as doing the formal, let's say, Mahasi style walking meditation, because, you know, like it's a fair distance. Like
Exactly. You're not going to get very far. Exactly. Yeah. So
I can't afford to walk slowly because like I need to get there, and I can't spend 2 hours a day just walking around because that's too long. So I have to walk at a fair pace, and then there's all these distractions in the city. So there's like people walking around, there's shops, there's smells, there's dogs, cars, the weather, heat, rain, all the things coming from the body, all the thoughts. So it's a really noisy environment, and just watching the mind as it like just watching how the mind is in that environment is really interesting, because I had actually never done that before too much. Like just noticing how when you're passing a person, your attention gets drawn to them, and all the mental chatter that just starts up of judging that person, you know, like liking their shoes, or, you know, thinking, oh, that guy should get a haircut, you know, all that all that mental chatter that just immediately starts going, and just watching that process and then coming back is really interesting.
Well, now here's the point. The first point is almost all of those people are doing it differently than you are, that you're doing something brand new. They're doing all of the stuff that you were just talking about. They just don't know it because it flitters through their minds so quickly. But now you're beginning to pay attention to what's going on, and you're saying, wait a minute, this is a jungle.
Yeah.
This is a thicket. This is it's a net, it's a thicket, it's a jungle in here and out there.
Yeah.
So what's the cause and what's the effect? Is the jungle on the outside affecting you on the inside? Or is the jungle actually just on the inside?
Yeah. The mind is the forerunner of all things, right?
Exactly so.
And I mean,
so the jungle is inside.
Yeah.
Inside of the brains of each one of those people out on the street, there's an individual jungle. And you're beginning to recognize yours. Congratulations. This is progress. That's one of the values of walking meditation out there and just out in the world, as you begin to realize what's going on out here. Pay close attention.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very interesting.
Congratulations. It's working. It's working for you. Keep at it.
I know. I can finally start telling when things are actually working, which is, I think, one of the benefits of the retreat, where things get so intense that you recognize those same tendencies when you come back into the world. So you do that really intense walking meditation, and then you do like the lighter version of it in daily life. So I feel like really noticing what happens when you do that intense practice and seeing like the beginnings of that, or the less intense versions of that in daily life, is really eye-opening. Because like the way it worked on that retreat is anything that could basically happen happened in the most intense way possible. And so let's say dullness.
Retreats are set up to do that, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, that's
If we
kind of
don't
the
put the
point.
students in a pressure cooker, they're not going to blow off steam.
Yeah. So, for example, noticing dullness has become much easier for me because I spent so much time in such strong dullness on that retreat, that I am now pretty familiar with how it feels. And so knowing like how it feels when it's super intense makes it much easier to tell when it's starting to happen. So
Yes.
just the
Now
slightest
that
hit
you
of
recognize it, exactly. Now that you see it, it's almost like a cat in a room, and the cat kind of gets an indication that there's a mouse in there, and so the cat starts to pay really, really close attention. And then all of a sudden he says, "Aha! I see you now. Now I've caught sight of you, even though it was just a glimpse." But now that cat can hone in on that mouse.
yeah.
And that's what you're doing. Now that you can really see it, now that you've got it, now you can start honing in on it. And as you hone in on it, you can begin to see it more and more subtly.
Yeah.
You're making progress. That's great. Sounds like that this retreat's a winner.
Well, let's 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 see about that. I think you'll change your mind shortly. I don't yeah. So should I continue on to the interesting bit?
um, yes, go ahead, and I'll save what I was about to say for later.
Okay. Um, so this was, and I want to be very careful in how I'm putting this because I don't want to be harsh to the people involved. So I want to be careful not to do that. But the retreat ended up being very difficult for me, and I actually ended up leaving the retreat early because it became too difficult and I couldn't deal with it. So there was intense negative emotion that I was dealing with, and I couldn't deal with it. So I decided to leave on day 13 out of 16, which obviously isn't the optimal way to go, especially because it's so close to the end. But
So where was your joy?
oh, this is where you'll change your mind about the retreat. There's okay, so without rambling on too long. So one thing that is very, very clear about this meditation center is that they're very traditional. They're very, very traditional. So, like,
Me
just,
too.
well, I mean, yeah, in a way, but okay, I'll just describe it and then you can judge for yourself who's more traditional. So,
No, I'll give them that booby prize.
when you go there, you have to take the 8 precepts,
Yes.
which is like just one example of their traditionality. There's tons of bowing all the time, which I'm fine with. That's okay.
The
And
Asians do that.
I kind of like it. Like they have like the Thai aesthetic of the golden Buddha statues and so forth, like lots of flowers and incense and so forth, which I like. But then one thing that I struggled with is that they teach a very specific method at that center and nothing else. So they teach Vipassana meditation according to John Tong, which, I mean, they make very clear that that is what they're doing. However, I felt that that at some point that just wasn't working for me anymore. And um, everything like other methods are, at least for the purposes of that retreat, are not allowed at all, which I see the point of, just doing the technique in the way that it's intended to be done without mixing it with tons of other stuff. Which makes sense. However, like in my case, what ended up happening is I was actively discouraged from pursuing, let's say, pleasurable concentration states. So, on that whole note of bringing in the joy, that's just, and maybe this is just my experience with it, but that's really hard in that system. It does.
Let me ask you a question, just a short question.
Okay.
And that is, if you were in a sitting state in great joy, how would they know that?
Well,
in other words, are you projecting on them something, or you for sure that they know this? That they've actively discouraged you from actually enjoying your sitting meditation?
So there's a daily interview with the teacher, and which I think is great, that you have that kind of one-on-one interaction daily.
Mm-hmm.
And I was trying to, as truthfully as possible, report what was happening for me, because I just wanted to, there's no point in kind of lying about what's happening. That doesn't make any sense, especially if you're taking precepts. That doesn't fly at all.
Okay.
So what ended up happening in the beginning for me was, after settling in the beginning, my mind was just getting concentrated like nothing I've ever had before. Like, it was just like pretty deep jhanas were just showing up with, like, whenever I smiled, like putting the slightest wispy smile on my face would just shoot me into jhana. Like,
I know what you're talking about.
like my mind was just ready for it. Like, it was like the mind was just sitting there. Can we please do the jhanas already? And like whenever I would just put in the slightest inclination towards that, it would just go there. Which I've never experienced that before. And I'm not talking about some light jhana of, I'm like kind of happy, I'm kind of energetic, I can focus pretty well. I'm talking very, like, not super deep, but I would say, like very strong piti all throughout the body.
Okay.
Very strong sukha as well, like just happiness bubbling up, just a big smile cracking on your face, like being totally immersed in that like energetic, happy, excited, gleeful state.
And what about thoughts in that state?
They were still somewhat present, but so it wasn't totally quiet in there. And to be honest,
Okay.
I wasn't pursuing this much, because what ended up happening was that when I reported this, I was told that this is not part of the method. So
Okay.
and
They are, by the way, correct. And I would give you the same advice, but I would do it differently. So let's dissect this, and then we can go forward now, but we know at least we've gotten to that point in the story. The language that you're using is doing a fairly good job of talking about second jhana, especially the path of second jhana, but not the fruit. And you're also about the question of the thoughts that were there a little bit, means that you were still moving back and forth between first and that second jhana. Okay, so that's the position that you were in, and the description of that has to do with um, there is a pond that is fed by a deep wellspring. And so that the water coming out of this wellspring not only filled the pond with water in the first place, but now because it's so much different temperature, that if you're swimming in this pond, you can find this source of cool water and you can swim down to it. And when you do, it's just completely overwhelmed. It's just stirring the water, and the body is just completely alive.
Yeah.
Now, the reason that I know this is number one is that we actually, at one time in my life, I was around a pond that had an artesian well in it, and it was the favorite of the neighborhood. Everybody loved to swim out to that part of the pond and get into that artesian well. But then this is actually an excellent description of second jhana, and that you were using that kind of language, that it kind of bubbles up, that the whole body is just kind of alive with joy. It's a really an amazing sensation to be in that place, just surrounded by all of this. And here's the thing is that when someone is actually in that artesian well, having it bubble up like that, that there is so much sensation on the body because of the water itself that the whole body begins to wake up because of all of the strong sensation that's being caused by the well itself, by the water bubbling. Well, here you are sitting in meditation having exactly the same experience, except that it's because the body itself is woken up. That's what the quality is of the second jhana, is the body becomes enormously alive. And by doing so, you just, oh God, it feels so good.
Yeah. And you're so happy. Like, it's just...
But don't tell those strict teachers, and here's the reason why. Because they'll say, no, we want Vipassana here. We do not want these jhana states.
Yeah. That's
We
exactly
want
what
you
they said.
to not go into the second jhana. We want you to stay in first jhana so you can pay attention to what's going on and note well. So at that level,